Council. Because the pot doesn't just end inside the pot. The contiguities around the pot, the enabling factors for quick evacuation of goods, quick in and out, it's your problem. So you could not have afforded to sleep. And so what should be the nightmare scenario for you now is worrying that it could happen again. So what is in your playbook as a PR unit for that? That's why I said the paradigm has to shift to become much more strategic. What if the build-up begin again? How will you communicate it? How will you deal with it? Of course, management will do its job, but from a public relations standpoint, how will you deal with it? Another point I want to ask you, now that we are enjoying that reprieve, the corridors have become very easy to navigate. How are you leveraging it as gains to strengthen Nigeria Shippers Council as an entity so that it becomes a brand? Because what happens is that there is peace in town. Everybody now goes to sleep. Praise God. That peace is gain. So from a strategic communication standpoint, you should be milking it, addressing it, consolidating on it from a public relations messaging standpoint into gains. But you have got to sit down together as a team and with strategic worldview, ask yourself, how do we do this? Because the window of doing that is what you can actually cash into your brand equity. Because we're talking about how we build this organization into a brand. Everything we do or fail to do as communicators is affecting the brand status, for good or bad. So you can see why I said that the paradigm has to change. It's not just because of handling bad situations. We have to stop doing what I call, or what CNN calls janitorial services. It's CNN that came up with that term, that terminology. Why? During the first tenure of Donald Trump, he would say so many things, and then the White House press unit turned into a PR machine. They were not communicating strategically on issues. So without people like Sarah Sanders, who's now governor in Arkansas, she was always at the forefront. And anytime Trump has gone to say whatever, has done whatever, the next thing you see her there trying to walk it back. And CNN named it aptly. All right, Sarah Sanders was around to, of course, do some janitorial services. We are not janitors. We are communicators. We need to lift our paradigm seriously, because that will help us shape even what our principal is doing. It will help us shape even his approach. You are responsible for your principal, the executive secretary, chief executive of the organization. You are responsible for him because, like in my time in NIMASA, our policy simply stated that the number one public image maker for the agency was the Director General. I don't know if that's the same in Nigerian Shippers Council. The same. That in every organization, the first public image for the organization is the chief executive. So your evolution must be so strong and robust to a more strategic level that it influences the approach of even your CEO and his immediate team when it comes to putting narratives out there and how they do that. It must be that way. So I'm appealing to you to take an open mind to this and begin to challenge yourselves towards this paradigm shift, to being more communicators and more strategic in your approach, whether the situation is good or bad. Because when you're more strategic, even when it's a bad situation, you can turn it around. Not by papering over the cracks. Not by trying to launder the situation, but by acknowledging, accepting, if it's a crisis, for instance, and then positioning what is being done and how you're restoring confidence back into that particular situation. It's still part of strategic thinking. But if you're still transactional, when there's a crisis, the first thing you do is to put up a wall of defense. As you know, in the port system, it's not only Shippers Council that is there. You know, there are the tractors. You begin to look for various other things and trying to skirt the issue. But if you're strategic, you can own the situation and then turn it around. Taking responsibility, showing that you're even taking responsibility to address it is a plus. It's part of what adds towards your brand evolution and your brand equity. So first order of business is the paradigm shift. If that's the only thing I can successfully implant in this team, to go back and create a stir and engender a debate amongst yourselves, I think it will make a world of a difference in directing the flow of how you conduct business communication-wise. So, with that out of the way, let's explore perspectives. I'm going to open the floor for just a few minutes before I go on to my second point. We're going to take this in phases, in buckets, depending on how much time we are eventually allowed. My style, because I've been a teacher all my life, is typically, when they ask me to deliver a paper, I always tell them, he was asking me about the paper. I said, don't worry about the paper. You know that I am the paper. I am the paper. Well, the goal in communication is to address the issue. That's the first goal. Because it's a retreat, that's why I didn't really bother about having a written speech. We will have all that we've discussed. You're going to get it in a clear paper format that strengthens the team. I'm sure by this evening, my team will have something out. I have my camera person doing the filming, so we'll get all of that together, and then we'll have something well structured for you that you can use and develop a playbook, come up with things that can really help the team, galvanize the team, give you that sense of above just PR. We are communicators. So let's deal with this. There's nothing too problematic, too negative that we cannot absorb, we cannot handle. And by the way, you're not the one necessarily responsible for the negative developments. Sometimes bad things happen in some sectors. But how we embrace it and how we take responsibility to communicate with the consistency, the rapidity that it requires, shows how proactive we are and gets us back in charge. So let's share some thoughts. We have agreed that the paradigm needs to change. So what are some of the things that you think you'd like to begin to do to shift the paradigm a little bit after this retreat? The floor is open.
Thank you. It's a conversation. How do you go from here? That's what it's telling me. So you can build up your own personal narratives. Where do you go from here and how do you do it?
So let's look at a scenario. I mentioned earlier on, of course, it will not be appropriate to mention specific names. Terminal operator A, for some reason, unknown to you, without reference to Shippers Council, without clearance to the NSC, tweaked its charges, its tariffs. Whereas freight forwarder B, who had initiated a large import, let's say, of wet cargo from China a month prior, based on a prior tariff plan. Because once you're in port, once you've arrived, you've arrived. There comes around other typical problems like demurrage and all of the things that are associated with delays, which freight forwarders don't like, or shippers don't like, the shippers end. And then they find themselves in a stalemate. This had happened for over 3 weeks and gradually began to seep into the press because of the status or stature of the two entities. It began to make for news. And the ramification that by the time the product is distilled through pumps or wherever, rather than go for 500 naira, we're looking at 1,500 naira. And Shippers Council is caught in the middle. How would this team handle it?
It's a question put all of you.
Yes.
Now let's hold on, Martin. I know you are senior staff. Put this scenario which happened with Shippers Council about 2 or 3 weeks ago. You were all there when they said One worked in One has increased charges. You were all there.
Okay.
You had it. Okay. Now at that level, what is just a similar thing you're asking me? What would be your response level when you hear that type of thing? And suddenly, one of the freight forwarders came about that what Shippers Council, that just they're wasting time, they don't have any responsibility to do. You had it. It was on press. Now he's asking you, at that level, what would be your response level? What would you do?
One way to look at it is, how have you been typically till now responding to those kinds of situations? And then what needs to change
From there.
Typically, when I remember during my time in governance, typically when a crisis like that happens, okay, all right, we need to go, let's put out something, let's send something to all of our maritime press, whatever. It's not our responsibility, this, just to at least circulate, at least let our voice be heard that we are in the mix. That's what we used to do back then. I don't know if that is also the experience. But so let's look at it from the way we have been doing it and then ask ourselves, can we do it much more strategically, differently, in a way and manner that we benefit more in terms of our name, in terms of our reputation, in terms of the brand? I didn't want to mention it.
No,
I have to be out of respect for this.
To help you further. You know, in that respect, like the issue of grant we are trying to discuss.
Yes.
Now, first and foremost, I think when it happened, the head of PR first looked at the story and saw that even Shippers Council gave that approval in 2021. In 2021. And the mischief maker in 2025, from nowhere, came and said, how can they be giving improving rate charges by this year? When the economy is bad, the cargo is not coming in, there are a lot of international this thing, and so why should they do that type of thing? Without knowing that this approval was secured in 2021 and met all parameters on ground. So the head of PR said, do I need to respond this? She now had to go to the regulatory, went to consumer, went to the Met, and saw that the man was not on ground. The person who was blowing the trumpet was not on ground. Okay? And then, to place them, they had to still go into the media world and told them, look at the time we gave the approval, and they met all the metrics to get the approval.
Okay.
And this is a process.
So my question, using this scenario, is to then make the point I made earlier on. You can't afford to sleep. Look, in every space, there are good actors and there are bad actors. As communicators, we are the ones playing in this space. We cannot afford to be logical in terms of our approach, thinking that every other player is logical. No. being paranoid must form part of how you operate. And there are so many scenarios like this. So a clear case of a bad actor. But who is taking the hit? Who takes the hit for it? It's your brand that takes the hit for it. That's the issue. It's your brand that takes the hit for it. So what that kind of scenario is telling you is that prepare for more. Prepare for more. We don't even know whether somebody has already posted it as we sit here. We don't even know whether someone has already posted something that then causes us a world of pain. So being intentional in terms of space occupation before they get there has got to be part of the strategy. It's eternal vigilance in today's world where anybody can easily claim that they are a journalist. You have to simulate their role. You have to have people on your team playing that devil's advocate. What if has got to be the question that you ask consistently, tirelessly. What if? That's what we used to do back then. I'll just say, what if they kidnap 6 people and 3 of them are Chinese? This is a year where we are applying to join the IMO and all of that. And what if? And people, in fact, people used to call me crazy back then. Why are you crazy? I said, but that's the nature of the business. That's the way that we are in.
Anticipation.
We must be proactive. And being proactive is simply being strategic. That before the enemy gets there, I'd already gotten there and I have a playbook for it. So I'm not just reacting, but I'm dealing responsibly with the situation. So what that is telling us is that our channels of engagement with our various stakeholders must be very intense, must be very vibrant, must be very consistent, so that in some ways we get to know things. It doesn't mean that you will not concede goals. You can win a match and still concede goals. There will be some things that will slip through the cracks, but I'm just saying, please, being paranoid has got to be part of how you do business. That's the newsroom mentality. Dealing with breaking news. How do you think these CNN and the rest get to the place where the news is breaking? Because they too, they anticipate. What if something happens here? What if a volcano? If you go to CNN now, they'll tell you they have a playbook for dealing with volcanoes. They have a playbook for dealing with various kinds of accidents should they happen. They have a playbook for coverage of being where, in a place like America, there's what you call gun violence. That's why they can bring those news. They always seem to be on top of their game. There's a playbook for it. It's so intentional. And we're saying that has got to be the mentality and the approach. You want to say something, please? Okay. That's got to be the mentality and the approach. It means that, my dear friends, we've got to encourage ourselves a little bit more to lift off beyond our role as public servants. That's just where I'm going to. Otherwise, we'll constantly be in firefighting mode, even when we are innocent, all because of a few bad actors. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything. Someone wanted to say something the other time. You still want to say something, please?
I wanted to say we have to be on the lookout. Shouldn't go sleeping. Our ears should be on the ground.
Absolutely. So let me ask this question. I really meant to ask this particular question of Shippers Council and then the PRT. About 2 months ago, NPA increased its rates by 15%. Of course, justifiably. I mean, they justified their not having done that in over 30 years. And then, given that the port infrastructures are actually deteriorating and there was a need for that. But what was the most dominant outcry in the media? It was the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. They dominated the space. And it was really giving MPA a lot of heat because the argument was very simple. What you have just done, MPA, is to make life more costly for Nigerians. And you see, that is a very simple story that sticks. You don't even need a specialist to craft that press release. You don't even need a press release for that. By increasing your rates, it means that everybody along that value chain will also increase. And who bears the cost? By the time you answer, the generality of Nigerians, the common man, pays for this. But in fairness to them, it was justifiable because they have to, the money has to come from somewhere. Otherwise, there will be no more ports if we continue at this rate. If the system collapses, what happens? The rate we are all complaining about spending more. We will still come back. We will still all have to spend that more. Only God knows under what circumstances. So I'm putting a question to Nigerian Shippers Council. What was your position in that development? Because one of the things I did as I was preparing for this paper, I was searching, looking for a statement from Shippers Council.
Listen, let me help you.
And there was radio silence.
Let me help you.
Okay. I'm going somewhere with the issue of somebody else.
You know how it happens. Now, you see, we have a problem in this country. The position of MPA is that I'm the landlord, I'm in charge of the post, and nothing has changed. The position of the federal government in terms of trade facilitation, protecting the interests of the shipper, and port economic regulation squarely is on Nigerian Shippers Council. Now, the federal government has told MPA severally that once it is issue of charges, Shippers Council must be taking, they must tell us what to do. Without considering that, without listening to Shippers Council, they went and raised the charges. Now, Shippers Council played safe. We don't want this interagency trouble. The next thing you will hear everywhere now, they have their money, they have their strength. They may even go to presidency to malign everybody in Shippers Council. You know them.
Yes.
And you know everybody in that place now. Once you give money, the news changes. Shippers Council went on the ground and wrote them a letter that what you did, if you had passed through us, we could have come together to say, justifying it. Because we know after 30 years, there are some instruments that should be there. And we justify from this, when this Naira was this, when this Tiger was this, when this, and everybody will be taken into consideration and it will be a flow. But they didn't do that. So the Manufacturers Association came in and fought them. And they let them back to us and came back to Shippers Council that look, this said, don't worry. There's nothing, we will sort it out within the agency level.
Okay. All right. So a very important point that you've made, and you've given us a very full background. But you see, MPA decides to do what it wants to do. I want us to treat these scenarios as just neutral developments in terms of things happen. Our interest is the consequence, the ripple effect. If I am a freight forwarder, I'm blaming Shippers Council. Pure and simple. Because Shippers Council, you are supposed to be looking out for me. I hope you get the point I'm making. I'm just giving you a sense of, because you want to build your brand. Your brand is taking all sorts of hits, and chances are that we don't seem to recognize that these things are depreciating our brand equity. They're just happening. That's the thing about brands. A reputation over time, it just forms. And we think that it happened at that last moment when someone pushed it or tipped it over the precipice. No. So things have been building, and then we just got to that apex. So the point I'm making, you've made a very important point. Shippers Council did take action, but in the final analysis, when you look at it critically, if I am playing in this port economic environment, the summary of what has happened was that I did not see anything. This is where communication is coming in. I did not get anything in terms of a narrative that would have come to me from the port economic regulator on this. And the overall summary was that of silence. Now, you could have worked behind the scenes, but how was that translated? Because we are talking brand and perception now. The issue now is perception amongst your stakeholders. That's where I'm going to with this. Could we have, because as I said, I even had to call a few of my friends in the maritime press. What happened? Why? I mean, Shippers Council was quite silent on this. The question is, do you think with this particular scenario, Shippers Council could have acted differently? Not in terms of NPA did what it did, beyond your control, but what could you have controlled better as a public relations unit, as a communications unit, to ensure that your brand did not suffer